Alright guys, in this video I'm going to talk to you about engine cases. We're going to look at these two cases and I'm going to talk to you about what I'm doing. We got an engine build coming up pretty soon. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I decided I was kind of kicking around what I'm going to do with the bucket truck engine. I was going to use the 40 horse case, and I don't know, I just decided I think I'm just going to go ahead and just use the B case from 1970. Because it does kind of limit the size, because these are just little things to know about the cases, so that if you're trying to figure some stuff out. This has 10mm studs in it, and it has, I think it's 14mm case savers in it. And if you open up this case to like 90.5, even to 90.5, it's going to be like opening up a 8mm stud case to 94. So you're going to have this case saver is going to be really close to the opening, and we don't like to do that. So, you know, some guys will do it. You can do it, but it weakens the case. So I prefer keeping it original, this part original. And I'm going to go with an 88 thick wall. So the 88 is a slip-in. It goes in the 85.5 opening. It's very wafer thin where it goes in here. But what they do is at the top of the piston, at the cylinder, you open your heads up for 90.5s. So it's a really super thick top, but it's a really thin when it goes in here. So what I'm going to do to make it stronger is, see, so if I don't really, you can put shims on them or whatever, guys do it all the time. Instead of putting a lot of shims on here, and when it's wafer thin like that, you know, might make it a little bit less strong. So I'm going to go with the short rods, and then I'm going to trim the skirts on the pistons. So if you use 88s have really long piston skirts, and we're going to trim them down and go with that, so that they don't hit the counterweights on the crankshaft. Because on a 74, which I don't think I'll probably ever put a 69 together again. It's really 74 same price. Why would I put it together a 69? And when a 74 goes in the same case with only very minor machine work. All you have to do is just notch out here, notch out here, notch out here, notch out there just a little bit. You'll just put the crank and the rods together, rotate it around. It's a little tiny bit of Dremel work. I don't know if this one might already be done for it. I see it's notched out, so it could be. I just notch them out a little bit, and that's it. It's really nothing much to do. So, and the 76 can be done the same way, but not all the time. Yeah, sometimes you'll put a 76 together, and you put a 76 in there, you might have to do a little bit more. You might find a few places in the case ribs where it hits. You got to put it together and check it every time. So what you do is you put the crankshaft together with the rods on it and the bearings, but you don't put the gears on it or any of that portion on it. You put it in the case, mock it up and rotate it around, and check and see where it hits. Tighten it, tighten up just these bolts here. Okay, put a little bit of oil on the bearings, of course. Turn it around. Get your Sharpie out. Mark here, mark here, mark here, mark here. You know it's going to go there. And then see if it hits anywhere else. Take the case halves apart. Put the crankshaft in each half of the case. Rotate it around. Look to see if anything is so close that when it gets hot, it will move a little bit and hit. So if it's like really like a really close, like 10 thousandths or something like that, it might hit when the engine warms up. So you got to really kind of look it over carefully. But the 76 also will go in without machine a lot of times. I have a friend of mine built a 76. He didn't have to do any machine to the case, no clearancing. So that's kind of cool. So if you want to go a little bigger, you can. The thing about going to 76 is you just, I mean, you run into, like if you go to 7688, you have to take a lot off the pistons. You know, you're gonna have to do some homework on that. If you go to a 90.5, then it's a little easier because they're short skirt pistons already. And then you got to decide which rods to use, short rods with shims or long rods, B pistons. You know, there's a lot of different ways to calculate it. You have to just do the math, you know, call one of the machine shops you go to and ask them. A lot of them will know what parts to use. Like if you buy a crankshaft from CB Performance, they have a really good rate on a 74, and I think they have a 76. I don't know. I think they had a 76 in that same deal. They're really cheap for 4140 cranks, and you can ask them what parts that they like. So for instance, they have long rods. I talked to them and she goes, oh, 90.5, we go 5.5 rods instead of 5.4 is stock, right? 5.4, 5.5 they go to, and B pistons, and then it comes out, I forget, I think she said no shims or very little or something like that. I don't know. I would ask them. So that's what I'm trying to say. A couple things, yeah, to know on those engines, things to look at. But that's not really what this video is going to be about. We're going to attempt to take a 40 horse case and modify it a bit. So I've heard of guys doing this. I've never done it. So we'll learn together, find out what can be done. The single relief case has, this is a dual relief. This is a single relief 40 horse. I don't know what the difference is between the 40 horse and the other as far as the holes go. These are supposed to be 10 millimeter. These are supposed to be, well, am I the right one? No, down here. Supposed to be 8 millimeter. This is supposed to be 10. So I'm going to go ahead and take the plug out of here. It's not hard to do. You can do this. Do it again if you're going to do any of these modifications. Do it at your own risk, and potentially there could be a problem, and you might end up ruining the case. So keep that in mind. Show you what I already did to this case. So this one, yeah, being nice. Okay, what I did to this case already is I took on the 40 horse case, and I think on the early 1500, the single relief cases, they had a smaller thing here. They also have a smaller pickup. So opening this up though will help if you're going to put a 26 millimeter pump in it. See, one of the things you look at when you're doing, a lot of engines were built production wise when they were doing like a rebuild or whatever. Everything I do is not production. I do a lot more than a lot of production places will do, and I recommend that you do the same. I took the oil pump and looked at it and measured the hole in the oil pump, and it was a lot bigger on the 26 millimeter pump that I got. And I'm not sure, there's a few different pumps you can get. I think this one was from a Type 3, and I think the Type 3 had a 26 millimeter. Don't really know for sure because it has a 311 part number on it. So I'm thinking it was a Type 3 that had 10 millimeter studs, or not 10 millimeter, 6 millimeter studs, and 26 millimeter pump. And you notice the other late models, Type, had 8 millimeter studs and a 26 millimeter pump. So they had 8 millimeter studs already in them. So a lot of guys will put in step studs and go with the pump from this one. But if you notice here, that hole in the dual relief is way bigger than this one. Okay, if I make this hole to that size, it's going to be bigger even yet than this is. So there's really no point in that. So that's why I'm saying the type 3, I believe it is, pump. I'm just guessing because I see a type 3 part number. I'll show you the pump in a second here. So you can see here, there's a type 3 part number on there. And it has 6mm holes in it. And it has that part number. So I don't know, you could look that up and play around with that. This is just, like I said, this is just, we're playing around with something to see if we can make it better. So stay tuned, guys. If you want to see a 74 stroker, we've already done a 74, but we're going to do another one. I believe we're going to do an 1800. And I'll show you guys how to cut the pistons and all that. I'm going to do the pistons myself. I talked to the machine shop, and he's like, you know, the last set I did them with a cutoff wheel. I'm like, okay, I'll do them myself. Same way. Cool. So it's a 10mm opening, or 11mm. And then if you see this one, I don't know if you can see that in the video. If I'm in frame, no, I'm not. So this one over here is a lot bigger. It's almost 13mm, so almost a ½ inch. So that's the difference between those two. But the 40 horse, I already opened, it was even smaller than that. So it was quite a bit smaller, and what I did is I kind of port matched it to this one. Let's see, make sure I got the intake side. That's the out one. Here's the intake side. It's bigger than the other one. So it's 11.8, and I opened this one up to just about the same. I mean, it's just slightly different. 11.28, just a little bit smaller, but it's very close. And then I could port match that a little bit, you know, when I put some paint on here, when I get my new pump, put some paint on here and actually pull the stud and set it exactly in place to make sure the ports match, and then grind them to make sure they match. This helps you get a lot more oil pressure, by the way. And it might be one of the reasons why these old 40 horses had issues, because maybe they didn't have a very good port match, and nobody did that last time. And this stuff, I believe, is going to help in the future when I build this engine. It's going to help get it to where it will have no oil pressure issues. So that's the first thing that I checked, is I checked this case half, and I also checked this one. Same thing. This port was way, way smaller than the one that comes off the 26 pump. You know, I think I pulled the other one, and it's even smaller. Let me see if I have that. We'll look at the 21mm pump and see what the difference. I don't know, these are 20 or 21, I can't remember, but because we don't run them. But look at this, how small that hole is. Let's compare the two, make sure we have the right inlet and outlet. So we're going to compare these two holes together. Look at the difference. So you can see that this one is quite a bit smaller, and this was about the same size as the one that was in here on this case. So this engine here had this pump in it. This 26 came out of this engine. This was not in the bucket truck. This was another engine I had around. This one was in the bucket truck, and it seized up the rear. So this one had a rod that came loose in it. So I think it was an oiling issue as well. So it didn't have enough oil pressure. So that was probably part of the issue. Somebody just bolted this together, and to try and get the proper amount of oil pressure for one of these things, they're already weak, because this is supposed to be only 8mm and that one is 10. So if you, let's kind of put this in perspective here for a second. So if you kind of put this in to like a sprinkler system, all right, it's real kind of more simple to understand. So let's say at your house you got an acre lot, like I have an acre lot, okay, and at the street I have a 3/4 inch main, okay, and to get good oil pressure at the back of my property, which is almost 300 feet from the front, or to get good water pressure to the back of the property, I have to have right at my main, even though it's a 3/4 inch, I go to a 1.5 inch pipe, and I pipe, there's 1.5 inch pipe to the back of my property. And that way there's less resistance and more supply in that larger pipe to get good water pressure way out here. So I don't know if that makes sense to you, but even though you're going from a small pipe to a big pipe, you know, if you're thinking about Venturi effects and stuff like that, if you go to a small to a big, the water flows less. That's true. We're not talking about pressure as much as we are like volume, or volume as much as we are pressure, one of the two. But anyway, at the back of my property, when I have 1.5 inches way back here, I get way more pressure. If I went to a 3/4 inch and I just stayed with 3/4 inch and I went 3/4 inch all the way to the back, all that resistance from a smaller pipe makes it have a lot less water pressure way at the back of the property. Well, the same thing applies when we're talking about oil in a Volkswagen engine. So every one of these things, and this is, you know, a guy say, I was going to say, oh, you can't outdo the Volkswagen engineers. You know what? It's not true. They built a production line car. We're building something a little bit better than that, right? We don't care about trying to build it in the masses. We don't care about trying to build, you know, hundreds of these cars. We're trying to build one that works better, right? So we're going to improve the oil flow on this case. We'll talk about the Hoover model a little bit later, but we're just going to talk about this first. So this supply line in here is a 10 millimeter, and on the 40 horse case, it's an 8. Again, we're going to take that apart and look. So, not down here, the one that goes all the way across, goes from here all the way across. You should be looking at your case and kind of figure out the oil flow. I'll show you the stuff so you can look, so you can see. There's a plug right here. It goes straight over to here and then drills straight down. So they drilled a straight line across here. You could take these out and drill them, but again, I'm not going to do all that. Maybe we're just going to talk about it. You can take that plug out, take this plug out, and put a threaded plug in there, and then drill all the way down to here, and then it goes straight from here across to there. You can see the little bubble in the side of the case. And again, you do this at your own risk if you're going to try it. But you can go from here all the way through. You can see there's a little one that goes down there. That little hole that goes down there, it goes to the center main, or the center cam. Okay, you don't need to drill that one out because it's the same size. But this one goes from here all the way through to the other side, and this plug can be pulled out. Guys do this a lot, and put a threaded plug in there. So I was reading on the Samba, and I've never done this before because, you know, again, 30 years ago, a case was $100. Why would you do it? Right? So, but let's look at some of the issues in doing this stuff. You have to think about everything that can happen from making one change. So this is what I'm kind of looking at. And again, you guys can comment on this and tell me what you think. I've seen other guys on the Samba that said they did this and it worked. So they drilled this one out to 10 millimeter. I don't know if I can get a 10 millimeter drill bit that long, but I know I can get it from Harbor Freight. I can get a 3/8, and 3/8 is about 9 millimeters. So pretty close. So I go to 3/8 drill there. And what one guy did is he drilled through here and opened this one up. Did the same modifications I did here, opening up this one, opening up this one. But if you look on your oil flow chart, the oil goes through first through the cooler. As it goes through the cooler, it goes through this passage, goes across here, goes up, goes this way, goes through the cooler, comes back down, and charges this line. Okay, the one going across. Charges that line, goes down, charges that line. And what happens is when it reaches full pressure, the piston in your relief piston right here goes down, and then so it supplies this whole cooler first, and then as it relieves, once it reaches that full pressure, then the rest of the oil will go directly into this thing here as the piston goes down. So if that kind of makes sense to you, that's how the pressure, that's how the relief system works. And on a dual relief, because you reach a maximum pressure, because you have a larger oil pump and you have larger oil passages, they have a second relief piston. Let's look at it in the back so you can see. At the back side of the case down here, so when you reach maximum pressure, it goes off into a little hole that relieves the oil, the excess oil, back inside the case. So it pressurizes this thing first, the cooler first. So if you don't have a second relief piston, what will happen if you have too much oil pressure in your system? Think about that for a second, guys. So if you have too much oil pressure in your system, what's going to happen, there's no place for it to relieve. So if you're running really high RPMs, typically on the street, I don't think we're going to get more than 100 pounds. It's hard to say because there's no way to check oil pressure back here. We can only check oil pressure right here, right? We only know what the oil pressure is here. We don't have a way to check it way back here. So it could possibly, I mean, if you checked here and this is still going to relief off. Well, it would probably tell you pretty close if you did check here, but you could rev it up to, 6,000 RPMs and see what you came up with. Just for a minute, half a second or two, just to know. After doing a mod like this. Or you could just do something similar to what I was thinking could be done. Is instead of running a stand-up cooler, just to eliminate the stand-up cooler altogether and put a cooler bypass in. They sell a cooler bypass for here. And just run only a full flow cooler. Now, if you're running 100 pounds of oil pressure, because you're running higher RPMs or whatever, and you've modified the mods that I'm talking about, but drilling this out, just this passage right here out, and you over pressurized it, you wouldn't have to worry about your cooler blowing up, right? Because that's the thing. If you look at some of the old modifying things guys did back in the 70s, before they had a lot of supply of dual relief cases, or 60s, they would do this, and they just leave the stock cooler on there, and guys were blowing up coolers, I guess. I mean, I don't know how many RPMs you need to be able to do that, but I suppose if you're running a lot of RPMs on the freeway for a long period of time, it could possibly build up a lot of pressure, and they blew up coolers. I mean, I don't know how much pressure one of those coolers would take. You can always comment that below. I don't know. So anyway, that was done years ago. So I was thinking, since cases are kind of a little more difficult to find, let's try and see if we could drill this out and modify it and build up more oil pressure, get more supply to all the mains and the cam. So anyway, we'll do that in a minute. But I'm real quick. A lot of guys had questions on the Hoover mod. Yeah. So I'm going to go over what that does, because I've kind of dissected it, torn it down, and kind of. So some guys thought, well, if you do a Hoover mod, it'll bring more oil pressure to the rear or to the thrust bearing, and no, that wouldn't happen. If you notice, this side of the case is not drilled, only the center main. This side of the case is drilled. Okay. Again, this side's not, that side is. And what the Hoover mod was, is you would pull this plug out right here, and drill through all the way through here, which connects all these lifters. So it would go through all these lifters, would go through, and then you drill straight in here. So you would basically figure out exactly the distance to drill down between. What they would do is use this side and say from this surface to that hole right there, and drill a straight line through to the center of this one. Now if you drill too far, you're going to hit this void right here. It's not going to be a happy day, and you're not going to be able to fix that. So that's the issue with the Hoover mod. If you drill too far this way, you're going to hit that void. If you drill too far this way, you're going to go through this end. Okay, so you have to mark your drill bit for the exact distance you're supposed to go, and drill a straight line through. And it's very possible. Guys do it all the time. You know, can be done. What was that mod for, though? Okay. I'm going to go over this because a lot of guys think that this would bring more oil to another part of the engine. It's actually going to take it away a bit. You're going to take it away from your mains, and you're going to put some more oil into your lifters. This was the issue that they were having, that they were talking about having in a race engine, high RPMs, long periods of time, on 1 and 2, so this is the 1 and 2 half, right? On 1 and 2, the rocker arms were getting dry because it didn't have enough oil supply on this side of the case, because it had to go around this bearing, or not around that, around the center main, center bearing, and that was the only supply for these lifters. And where guys have issues today is if they modify and they go to a hydraulic lifter on this side, then you might want to do the Hoover mod, because you need more oil supply for these lifters. You might notice if you run hydraulic lifters that the 1 and 2 side of your engine takes a little longer to get oil, them not to be clacking. So that's, you know, because there's not enough supply on this side. So anyway, connecting these ones together and getting another hole over here to get the oil supply from the cam thrust, okay, would help only supply the lifters with more oil, lifters and push rods on that side of the engine. That's what the Hoover mod was for. It wasn't for anything else with the mains or any of that stuff. It wouldn't help those things. If you just kind of look at it from a reverse engineered standpoint of what they were doing, it would take oil away from those, if anything else, because now it's going to limit the supply to these things here. So, you know, if you did port match and everything else, like if you port match your bearings and you port match your oil pump, like stuff I'm doing, then it might be okay to do the Hoover mod, but you better do all of it if you're going to do it. Because, and you better be having an engine that's going to be running a high RPMs for a long period of time, or running hydraulic lifters. That's the only reason that I would ever do it. Anyway, I hope that part makes sense for you. All right, we're going in. Pilot hole there. Pilot hole here. Let's see what surprises are in there. Again, never done this before, but just gonna give it a shot. See what happens. I got a lot of money in this case already. I know it's gonna work. I just got a feeling. Right, this side came right out. Look inside here. Looks like a 10mm hole in there, actually. So the thing is, I don't really know. This could have been drilled. It'd be good to check it if you were thinking about, you know, trying to get the most out of your 40 horse case. Yeah, it's 10mm. I wonder how big the other one is. And I could always pull that one out. Just put a plug in it. I think I've got plugs. Wouldn't hurt anything to put a threaded plug in either one of these. Just put a threaded flat, what they call them, countersunk plugs, I think. Just thread this up and put a plug in it. It'll be fine. And then to full flow this one, you pull this one out right here. I can do that. All right, so this is, I think, where the issue is, and maybe this is what they were talking about, because I was looking at, they didn't really have any illustration or anything on the Samba, so I'm just like, okay, let's just dig in and start doing it and see what we come up with. So I look inside there. If you look inside, let's get you guys up so you can see yourselves, make up your own mind. If you can see the upper hole, that looks like an 8mm, and the bottom one looks like a 10. I measured, I think, 11mm on the bottom. So the two issues that I've seen so far with the 40 horse case is this hole going from here to there is way too small. The pickup side was way too small. I think if those two things were modified, that would probably help bring oil in with a 26mm pump. So if you took out a, you know, again, do this at your own risk. If you took out a 21 or 20 or whatever they are, I think it's 21, and you put it in a 26, I would port match this one, just run a drill down to make sure, don't over drill it. I just drilled from here to there and one from here to here, and you need an extra long drill bit to do that. So I'm going to get an extra long drill bit to do it. And then I'm looking in here and I'm thinking, well, to charge this line properly, let's look inside the other side. I might drill this one larger. So I know I would drill from here to here. All right, guys, this is what I finally ended up doing here. Is I found that this port in the top had a very small orifice in it. So it goes in, the oil goes in through here, or not, in the bottom one, sorry. Had a really small, or the bottom ones, no. It's the one on the top, sorry. Getting confused here. So the one on the top had a really small orifice down inside. So what the oil does is it picks up through here, and you can kind of see how this bubbles out right here. It bubbles out right here and goes up inside there, and then goes over a bit until it lines up with this one. And there's a little section there where it's very small, so it's only like 8 millimeters. From what I think I measured it, it was 8 millimeter. So I opened that up to about 10 or 12. I don't know what it was. I opened it up quite a bit to whatever. I opened it up to the same opening as I did here. So it's like, I think 11 and a half somewhere. And opened it up between that opening there. So the supply getting to the relief piston will be a lot larger. So what happens is then it goes from here, and then as it goes through here, it does one of two things. Either it goes straight this direction, or it goes down and gets relieved over to here. So as the relief piston drops, right, as the pressure builds, the relief piston drops, then oil goes into this passage down here, and also into this one. And so this one goes up here, goes over here, goes through where the oil thing is. There's actually, you can see where this one drills. They drill through here, and it goes all the way over and makes a right-hand turn, comes up, goes through the oil cooler, comes back down, goes down here and supplies the center of this rail. So let's talk about how the oil flows in this. Normally, how it flows. So, and it's the same on dual relief as on single relief. So the oil goes up through the oil pump, comes into here, and the relief piston, so when the engine's cold, the relief piston is all the way up. You first start it, the engine oil goes up over here, goes up through here, goes up here, goes through the cooler first, it comes down and charges this line right here, the center of this line. That's what happens first. As it builds enough pressure up, after the engine's running for a minute or two usually, then the pressure relief piston starts to drop a little bit, and then it starts to let oil go directly over to here and bypass going through the cooler. So some oil is going to be going through the cooler. It goes through the cooler first and then goes into this rail here. Okay, that's what happens first. And then as the engine has pressure built up, then it goes down and more of it will go over here. So what this will do is this will help it build pressure here quicker because it's got more supply here. If it has more supply, it has the ability to build pressure and relief through two different areas at the same time. So then it'll build oil pressure and go down here, and also have still oil going up through here. So now the problems and benefits to that. The problems is these are smaller than on this case, if you see here. So what will happen is it will get to relief pressure quicker with this like this. And your oil, you're still going to reach the maximum amount of pressure. You don't get more pressure than that. But if you don't have enough supply, then if you don't have enough supply, you can have lower pressure here. Okay, that means you're bleeding off a lot of places. But your pressure normally is going to be the same all over the place. But it's about volume. So if we get more volume of oil into the circuits, it's going to help the engine oil. I know it's going to work. Now the issues are, somebody might say, you've re-engineered this thing, and there's the potential. So you got to go, whenever you do anything like this, you have to go through the whole chain and make sure you've done everything. All right. So, and do your homework and make sure you've checked every possibility of everything that can happen. So if it charges this, okay, what it can do is maybe have less oil going through the cooler, okay, because it's going to relief quicker, right? Still the same amount of oil should be going through the cooler, but it could do that because you could build up a lot of pressure here and a lot of pressure, trying to think, you could build up pressure coming back feeding, if you know what I'm saying. It could want to back feed and not go the same direction. So that could happen and not allow as much oil to go through the cooler. So, it's something that if you were to try and do this, what I'm looking at it like this is I'm going to full flow this case. So, and I'm going to full flow it, and then I'm going to either, I could run a cooler or I could block this off. Or I could put a doghouse on here. A doghouse, I don't know how that would work really. But let's just say I block this off to give more air to number 3. So now I'm going to take the stand-up cooler out altogether and just put a block-off plate on here and run one outside cooler with the thermostatic fan. We did this years ago, and it works. It runs cooler. We used to get oil temp cooler than stock. A stock stand-up cooler, it would run cooler if we put the cooler somewhere else, as long as it's not over the fan. One of the things you don't do, never put your oil cooler over that fan. That's something we found out does not work because you block the airflow from the fan. Just that radiator being there for the cooler would block the airflow from the suction side of the fan, and less air would go over the cylinders. And we found out the engines run hotter like that. But we did test engine temp, head temp, and oil temp by removing this cooler and putting a block-off plate on here. Or sometimes we used to do this without doing full flow. We put one of those converters on here, and we put the 2 lines out and put it to another oil cooler. I would not do that because of the modifications I made here. I want the oil to flow in right here. I don't want it to go in through the where the cooler was, because those ports are smaller. So if I put it to here, if I put my oil supply to here, and I have the oil cooler 72 pass, and I have AN fittings and everything so that it won't explode, you won't have an oil line blow off or anything like that. AN fittings, and then you can, when you go to pull the engine, all you got to do is just unscrew the AN fitting and put them on. I'll put links in the description where you can get those on Amazon. I saw them on there really cheap. So you can buy a kit with those if you were going to do something like this, or you're just going to try it. Again, if you're going to do this at your own risk. This is not engineered by Volkswagen. This is something that we've done. I didn't do this particular mod, but I'm thinking, I know this will work. I don't have any doubts that it's going to work at this point, because I've gone through the whole steps of figuring out the oil flow, what's the things that could go wrong, and there isn't really any downside to it other than not enough oil could flow through the cooler, and you could run hotter because of that. But if you run external cooler, it should be fine. So anyway, that's what I determined on this. So I'm not going to build, I don't think I'm going to put this one together for the bucket truck. I think I'm just going to go to the dual relief since I have it. It's just the tow bill is so expensive for that thing if something goes wrong with it. I don't think it will, but it's just such a pain that I just would rather just go dual relief on it because I have one. So we're going to be building this engine. I've got parts in the machine shop right now for it. It's going to be coming up very, very soon. I'm going tomorrow. About the time you probably watch this video, I'm going to be going to get the parts. So that's going to be happening very quickly. All right, so anyway, that's it for this, guys. I'll talk to you guys in the next one. Hope you like it. Hope it helps you if you were thinking about a single relief case, something you might want to do with one, because there's a ton of single reliefs out there, and there's really, I wouldn't put a lot of RPMs in it. That's the other thing. I just wouldn't do it. You're asking for trouble with doing that. Putting a lot of RPMs in something like that. This one, you can run RPMs on these, and this isn't the ideal case. a 10 millimeter stud is not the ideal. It's 1970. It didn't have all the bells and whistles on these. So, but if you have one of these, and yeah, they're a great case, I just wouldn't take it up to 90.5 because the studs, will be very close. So, anyway, I'll talk to you next one. Please like, share, and subscribe.